Folks, I forgot to start my stopwatch. I always try to make the marks on these things. Well, that way I get invited back. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to be pushing this a little bit because it's a lot of details here. So I got to push through it, and then I got to run off. Now I got to find my computer somewhere else, not here. So, insights on transformative strategies to grow aquaculture in urban areas. Okay, now we've heard for a long time that we want to grow aquaculture. We're not growing enough food here in the United States, but this is the tip of the iceberg presentation. This is part of a project that I started back in 2022. This is Aquaculture 2022 in San Diego. I love San Diego because we're nearby, and I went to grad school there. So we've got to go back there. But now, there's this thing in urban planning called transformative planning, which means planning with a purpose to make things better for the future. Now, we know that we need to grow. I got to fly through this. We know that we need to have more fish. We grow just a tiny amount of fish according to how much the world grows. So just this little green thing here is North America. We're infinitesimal. Okay, as far as the amount of food that we grow, but we're not out of spaces where we can grow food. Some people say there's nowhere place else to grow food in the United States. Everything's taken. No, it's not. Okay, we can talk about the urban areas because the urban areas are tremendous assets. Now, the challenge with growing food in urban areas is that whenever we talk about it, we give people one model, the commercial model, the vertical farm model, or something similar that are extremely CapEx. Okay, that's extremely expensive. It's very hard for people to get ownership in those things. So is there other ways of doing it? Is there a way that you can be more disruptive in providing food at another level, not taking away the vertical farms because they're wonderful, but is there a way to provide food on the community level? Now, if you remember long ago, the Victory Gardens, okay, they fed 40% of the people in the United States in 1945. Now, this is a thing called a disruptive innovation. Now, aquaponics, I all love aquaponics, but it's kind of at a standstill. Okay, but there's a reason for that. This is the disruptive and innovation curve. How something flows through the society, and if your technology doesn't get past this point where there's new people and everybody loves it, but these people over here have different needs than these people over here. If your technology doesn't meet these folks' needs, it falls into this thing called a chasm you never see it again. Okay, we're right here. Now I know there's some people who disagree with me, but we're right here. We've been here for a while. I want it over here. Okay, because it's an amazing technology. And now, also in urban areas, we have challenges. For example, this is the city of Phoenix. The city of Phoenix is 512 square miles, with 52% of it in a food desert. That doesn't mean that everybody who's in a food desert is bothered by that, but we have 43 food deserts, 52%. That's a whole lot of people out of 1.6 million. Now, there's this thing called catalytic innovation. Catalytic innovation is when this is the guy who discovered disruptive innovation, Dr. Clayton Christensen. Well, he had a similar concept, because when disruptive innovation is all about bringing down the cost and having simpler alternatives that they do what the big alternatives can. Well, we're talking about food production. That means that you can reduce the cost looking at different models, but when you do so, it allows you to make social change. There are people who couldn't be in that market who can now take ownership because the cost of the farm has just dropped by 75%. That gives people another opportunity to participate in the urban food market. And so what we did, we decided that we were part of a project where we put 70 odd small farms in people's backyards. And we were not growing lettuce and tilapia. We could, but we focus instead on catfish and everything else. We found more than 100 different kinds of crops that we could grow along with the catfish, and tilapia on occasion. And so that allowed us to go with that same model as the Victory Gardens to decentralize production. Instead of it being one thing here that you build, for $10 million, we had little farms scattered all over the place. And that would allow the individuals who live in that area to take ownership of those farms and do some great things with them. Here's the Victory Garden model, and as you said, you see this right here is a standard Victory Garden from long ago, and it grew about 200 pounds of food. But over a 375 square foot area, this does the same thing, okay, in a fraction of this. In fact, this does double that. This does 400 pounds in about 100 square feet, leaving the rest of the backyard to be used for something else. Come on, machine. There we go. So here's the system. Here's the area of food that it supplies for. It also allowed us to use some other business models. And that is, whenever you have a farm, they talk about, well, you can't outcompete the farmers in Yuma because they can get lettuce for 25 cents a bushel. Well, that's not the competition. This is the competition. If you can grow food in your own farm for less than you can buy off the shelf, you win. And that means that one of the major cost factors in creating food for your own is getting the cost of the system down. Okay? And that all by itself drastically reduces the cost of the food that you produce. And then you have to create an ecosystem around it. As an example, if you have 30, 40, 1,000 small farmers, you got to have someone who can aggregate that food, because most of them are producing a whole lot more food than they can eat. So the excess food can go to a food aggregator such as a food hub. And it's critical that everyone get access to business training. If you don't want to start a business, you don't have to. But if you can, limited liability corporations don't cost nothing. Class in economics costs very little. So it gives you the opportunity to go beyond that and understand what you're doing if you want to. And again, as I mentioned, the ecosystem, you gotta have the ecosystem around here to support you if there's going to be more small farms. So in communities, you have to know where do you get your raw materials. You have to know where you get your feed, where you get your equipment. Okay, where's the hatchery at? Where's the brood stock at? We have to go to Arkansas, okay, to get our catfish. And so we got to solve that issue. I can get them, but not the regular person, because we've got to solve that issue. Somebody got to do your processing if you want to turn those catfish into fillet. So that if you're growing out, all of these are opportunities for community-based businesses. All of these create the aquaculture industry that we're talking about in places where they normally would not be, such as a neighborhood in the middle of the desert in Phoenix, Arizona. Again, this is a tip of the iceberg talk. I'll be back again in Las Vegas to talk about this. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the audience?
Yes, sir.
I would just say as a general comment that some of our best models for what you're talking about are engaging in the school campus atmosphere in your community. They have greenhouses, they have technical education programs, they have space, and we found really good success with modeling it that way. So, Maryland Sea Grant in particular. So I would just say to everybody, engage in your school system community more to kind of advance what is being presented here. You'll find some success with that.
I do agree. Yes, ma'am.
So what challenges have your backyard farmers had in terms of things going wrong?
Oh, lots of them. Okay. One, we had to notice our aquaponics system doesn't look nothing like you ever seen. Okay. I know I've been in aquaculture itself for almost 50 years, and I've seen all kinds of different recirculation systems, and I got a PhD in it, and all of that. That allowed me to use my knowledge to just reinvent aquaponics so it worked better, and we could build one of those in 2 hours instead of 10 days. Okay, though there's a little prefab work, but once you get the prefab work, thing comes together like a Lego blocks, and it allows us to get in production within 2 weeks. We do cycling and everything else. We got a little few tricks in that, and so that made it easy. Okay, but whenever you solve a problem, you make more problems. So, but one of the big ones I just had another talk about was climate change. Okay, this was the original design was designed for maybe 110-day. A few days of 110 degrees. When you start getting days of 118 degrees, it's all different. And then when you start getting the heat island effect, we get surface temperatures up to 160 degrees, okay, you get other issues. You actually get material problems, okay, not just biology. We got some biology problems. If you look at the catfish, we're getting too hot. And they started eating each other, and they didn't like the circumstances. The plants were burning, and we had to change shade screens. But these were all innovations that were continuing innovation. Once we saw it, we found solutions for it. The only challenge we have is that it's going to continue to get worse. Okay, but then we also had social education problems, such as the food was growing so fast when we had, someone would have a big head of broccoli, and like, okay, I'm getting more food than I can eat, I'll just let it stay there. What happens to a head of broccoli when you let it stay there? It goes woof, and it's no longer really edible. So it was part of the education process that no, you can't let a head of broccoli just stay there, or other cauliflower or anything like that during those months. And the same thing was true about plants hanging out under the vegetation, particularly Armenian cucumbers. Okay, they're hiding under the vegetation, and you think you got them all, and there's another 20 pounds that you haven't harvested. And our Armenians get like this if you let them, so you got to harvest thing on time. And then the whole fish culture thing was a whole other issue, but they loved fish culture. That was their favorite part with the fish farm. So I got to do more of that. No, and one of the issues is that we need a scaled fish that's temperate water. Tilapia is warm water, catfish is cold and cool water, but catfish don't have scales. A lot of people can't eat catfish, so we need something that is scaled for temperate waters, so that catfish is no longer not kosher or halal. So we need something like a centrarchid, the bass bluegill, but they grow really slowly, and we need some work on them so that we can get growth rates similar to tilapia, which we can get at least a pound over a year, if not more. And there's a lot more. Any other questions? Thank you very much.